Hi there. Let's start. You may have heard of speed dating or speed interviews. We're going to do a speed experiment. So I'm just going to get on with it. It's voluntary and it's anonymous, so you don't have to do it, but if you do it, don't worry about how you do. There is no right or wrong. If you see yourself on this side of me, of my line here, you call yourself, you're in group number 1, and if you're on this side, you're in group number 2. And the important thing is I'll show you some slides that you answer on the slips that you have in front of you, and just do everything silently. So first, group 2, turn away from the screen so you don't see it if you wish to participate. So turn away so you don't see what's going to be projected. And group 1, here we go. Please read this question silently and answer it. Okay. Now, please read this question silently and answer this question. Okay, sorry to rush you, but if you could get your answers down, we'll move on. Okay, now, group 1, please. Group 1, please put your group number at the top of the slip and circle it, and turn away from the screen now. And group 2, you can turn toward the screen. And are we ready? Okay. Please read this question silently and answer it. Okay, and now please read this question silently and answer this one. Okay, if you finish up, please write your group number at the top of your slip and circle it. And everyone can turn forward again, and if you're in group 1, pass your slips toward this aisle. And if you're in group 2, pass your slips toward this aisle, and they'll be collected, and we'll get to them later in the talk. So let's talk about your unconscious mind, and let's begin by talking about what I mean by the unconscious. So in modern science, what we mean by the unconscious are processes that go on in your brain that are automatic, they don't take any effort, they're beyond your awareness, so you don't know they're happening, and they're mostly beyond your control. And because of this, we don't really understand what is influencing our thoughts, our perceptions, our feelings, our judgments. And so that has a huge effect on our behavior. But I want to contrast the modern unconscious with the Freudian or the Jungian unconscious. And what we mean by the unconscious in modern science today is our mental processes that are outside of our control and our awareness because of the structure of our brain. It's not the Freudian unconscious, which was hidden for emotional reasons, and that could be revealed through introspection or through therapy. This unconscious is totally different from that traditional idea of the unconscious. And the field that I'm going to talk about is called social neuroscience. It's a new field that has just begun in about the last 10 years, and it's a combination of 3 fields. One is social psychology, which is the psychology of how people interact with each other. The second is cognitive psychology, which is the psychology of how people think. And the third is something completely different. It's neuroscience, especially neuroscience using modern technologies such as fMRI technology, which images your brain and can show what parts of your brain are functioning as you have thoughts, feelings, perceptions, as you make decisions. And this kind of technology has revolutionized psychology because prior to this, of course, we couldn't look into the brain to see what was actually going on, and psychology was kind of a soft science. But this has made psychology much more of a hard science because we can connect brain mechanisms and structures to the behavior that we see. So I'm going to talk today about the unconscious in 2 realms. The first is the realm of physical perception, hearing and seeing. And the reason I'm going to talk about that is partly because, of course, it's very important to how we survive and interact in our environment, and partly because all the processes, some of which are very complex, that have to do with your social perception, are similar or analogous to the same processes that happen in your hearing and your vision, which we can illustrate very clearly. And I want you to come away with this lesson, that our perceptions, both our visual and our physical perceptions, and also our social perception of other people and situations in life and business, are very much affected by our unconscious. That what we perceive isn't really what the data that it's literally out there, but it's a construction that our minds make using our imagination. It's not really what's there. This is an example from sight. This is just a typical scene of a roadside view that you might see if you're driving down the road, and it's what we normally perceive. It's very clear. But now I'm going to show you a slide that is made from the data that actually hits your retina. So this slide that I'm about to show you is what you would perceive if there was no unconscious processing, if you saw literally the optical data that hit your retina. And as you can see, it's very fuzzy. It's a little bit clearer toward the center, and outside it's very fuzzy. And the reason that you don't have this horrible vision and bump into things and fall off cliffs, etc., is that your unconscious mind automatically, with no effort and immediately, processes that data and gives you the clear image. And when it processes the data, it uses not only, of course, the data that's there, but it uses other things. It makes its best guess, and it uses things like your expectations, your desires, and your beliefs. So let's see how that works. One of the things it also uses is the context, and I'm going to illustrate that here. If you look at the squares A and B, A looks like a dark square, and B looks like a light square. That's not really what's going on. A and B are identical. The optical data that's coming to your eye from square A and square B are exactly the same. They only look different because your unconscious processing is taking the fact that there's a shadow there and that there's a checkerboard, and it's presenting you with what looks like a real image. As I remove the context, you can see what happens. Now you can see that they're both the same. So this is an illustration of how your unconscious mind helps you to see things in an environment that will make sense. Now, notice the automaticity that you can't overcome this. If you look at the square, if you look at the checkerboards, you cannot see A and B being the same, even though if you look at the A and B on the white background, you see that they are. Here's another example. Humans are very social creatures. So facial processing is very important to identify people and also to tell what people are thinking and what they intend to do. And because we're social creatures and we have to get along, as we evolved, a lot of our mental processes in our brain evolved to help us get along with other people and to understand them. These two pictures are Barack Obama, and they probably both look more or less like Barack Obama, but let me show you what happens when I turn them over, because the part of your brain that focuses on faces and it helps you to understand and identify faces doesn't really work for upside-down faces because we're not used to seeing people upside down. So it evolved for right-side-up faces. Look what happens when I turn it over. So now you can see that the picture on your right is very deformed, and the picture on the other side is not. Now watch as I turn it back over, they look again kind of normal. So this is your unconscious mind at work and then not at work. Let me give you now another example from hearing. This will show you that hearing works in a similar way or analogous way to vision in how you use, for instance, context. Here's an old song that you may recognize by Led Zeppelin. Should be playing right now. Audio? Well, these are the words to the old song, so you don't really have to hear the forward part, but I need to get the audio going before the next slide. Anybody? Is our audio going to work now? There we go. All right. You can trust me that was the song playing, and these are the words. But the question is, when I play the song backwards, are you going to understand words? Was the group Led Zeppelin smart enough to make a song, to design a song that makes sense both forward and backwards? So I want you to listen to this audio, let your ears process it, and see if you can understand the words. I apologize if you don't speak English, this may be a little difficult. So, is this making sense? I bet it's not. This is whether you speak English or Turkish. When you hear the song backwards, it sounds like gibberish. But now I'm going to play the song again for you, and I'm going to give you context. So just like you saw the squares differently when I put the checkerboard there and when I took them away, I'm going to put the checkerboard here. Now I'm going to put some words here. You follow along with the words and listen to the same audio again and see if you don't hear these words. So now you heard the same thing that you heard before, but you heard a different reality. Now you heard words, and before you heard gibberish. So which is it? Well, they really didn't make these words backwards, but we take the music and we match words that sound like the backward song, and when you have that context, your brain makes you think that it's really there. So this is an example of your unconscious processing at work again. I'm going to play again a little bit of the song for you, but just to show how automatic this is, I'm going to play the song with the words again, the backward song. I want you to listen to it and read the words, but don't hear the words. Try and hear it as you did the first time, as gibberish. So now when you hear it and you watch the words, just like you couldn't see the checkerboard and see those squares as differently when you're looking at the checkerboard, you can't avoid hearing the words when you have the context there. So these are examples of your unconscious mind and how it works and how you have no control or awareness over its functioning. But let's talk about social perception, because that's really where it's really most interesting. And I want to convince you that our social perception is also not a direct construction from the data that you get about people, but uses a lot of other factors, such as your beliefs, your desires, your expectation, and the context, to make a picture of other people and social situations. This slide illustrates an experiment that was done in California. Researchers made flyers for the candidates in two fictitious political races. And on the flyers, they listed for the liberal candidate the qualifications and the views, and also for the conservative candidate, data like that. But they also put a picture in for the liberal and for the conservative. And then they had people come in to read these flyers and say, who would you vote for if you were voting? And the difference is that half the people saw flyers where the liberal was made to look more competent and the conservative was made to look less competent, and the other half saw flyers where it was the other way around. And so the question is, does the look of competence that was in these flyers affect the way people vote, or do they vote just on the data that they think they're voting on, which is the other data that was listed? And the result was very dramatic. When the conservative candidate looked more competent, she got 58% of the vote, but when she looked less competent, she got only 44%. So there was a 14% vote swing. So people thought that they were voting based on certain data, which was the hard data, but they were really also voting on looks. Of course, this was in a laboratory, so you might say, does it really happen in real elections? And fortunately, a professor at Princeton decided to find out. In 2006, he collected pairs of headshots of the competing candidates in dozens of races around the United States. And then he got people from districts who are not in who those races were not being run in, people who didn't know the candidates, just to look at the pairs of photos and rate who looks more competent. So he had these people look at the pairs of photos and tell them who looks more competent. He took the statistics on that, and he predicted the outcomes of all these races based purely on looks. Not beauty or handsomeness, but the look of who is more competent. And how often was he correct? He was right 70% of the time. So in 70% of the races around the United States, the candidate who looked more competent won the race. So obviously, we're not just basing our vote on what we think we're basing it on, but our unconscious mind is pushing us to vote for people based on looks. Another thing that influences a great deal is touch. All primates rely on touch to form bonds and trust with each other. Most primates spend hours a day grooming each other. Humans do it a little bit less, and it's much more subtle, but it really has an effect. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about how you take in data from people based on whether or not they touch you. And I'm talking, when I say touch here, I don't mean a grope or a big hug. I'm talking about something as subtle as a quarter to half a second light touch on the elbow or the shoulder. And my favorite experiment in this realm was done in France, where the French researchers hired 2 actors to stand on street corners in a town in northern France on sunny days in the summer and proposition all the single young women who walked by. And to all the young women, they said the same things. Here's the script translated into English. The difference between how they treated the women was to half the women, they provided this light quarter to half second touch on the forearm or the shoulder, and to the other half they didn't. And the question was, would they increase their success rate with the touch? And the answer is yes, they did, by a great deal. They were successful in getting the phone number of the women 10% of the time without the touch and 20% of the time with the touch. So it doubled their success rate. Now, of course, picking up a woman is a sexual-related activity, so you might think that touch is expected to have a greater influence there, but this same experiment has been done in many other contexts. For instance, waiters and waitresses in restaurants increase their tips by 30% if they give their customers a light touch. So this is something that, again, that happens subconsciously. When they interview people after the experiment, most of them did not remember even being touched, and they all denied that the touch is what influenced their decision. Okay, now in my last minute, I want to convince you that these unconscious processes also affect you, because a lot of people hear these things and go, oh, yeah, other people are silly, aren't they? But it doesn't work with me. So before this talk, at the beginning, I did a little experiment. I asked you how much you would expect to pay for this hotel room. And I divided you into 2 groups. And typically when I do this experiment, Group 1 tends to average around $1,000 or $1,200 in their answer. And Group 2 tends to go to like $200 or $300. Let's see what you guys did. Sean? Thank you. Thank you. Whoa, okay. Group 1, $1,857. And Group 2, $131. So how did I, the magician, influence you subliminally to make these guesses? Because I didn't twist your arm and I didn't give you any different data on the two rooms. Both groups took in exactly the same data, and somehow you made different conclusions. And the difference was this. Group 1 was asked first this question: does this room cost $5,500 a night? I think the answer is pretty clearly no. But Group 2 was asked, is this $55 a night? The answer is also no. So when you answered the second question, you probably didn't think you were basing your answer on the first question, but you were. This is the context, just like the checkerboard was, and just like the words were to the backward song. So let me end with a quote from Carl Jung, who I don't agree with his specifics of what he believed, but I think he was right when he said, "These subliminal aspects of everything that happens to us may seem to play very little part in our daily lives, but they are the almost invisible roots of our conscious thoughts." Thank you.
Leonard, oh. Thank you. Thank you so much. The topic is, do we really choose? You just proved that we don't really choose.
You choose, but you don't exactly know how you're doing the choosing.
Farkındasınız değil mi? Yani seçtiğiniz sanıyorsunuz ama orası muallakta değil mi? Leonard, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.